There has been another huge twist in the race for the championship, and this one has come at the expense of McLaren, and it could not have come at a more critical time in the season. Just when it looked like McLaren had seen off any attempt from Max Verstappen to somehow come back from the deficit that he faced to both of the McLarens and beat them to the title, they are now looking dangerously over their shoulders once again, all because of their own undoing. McLaren saw both of its cars finish in the top 4 in Vegas, which was its best result at that particular track. Norris finished on the podium in 2nd place and Piastri was 4th. But those results, those big points for their championship hopes, have all been lost because of a technical infringement from the team. The FIA stewards investigated both McLaren cars after the race and found that both of them had exceeded the minimum thickness for the plank assembly. And when I say they've exceeded it, we're talking millimetres. So how did McLaren get it so wrong, and what does this mean for the title battle? First of all, cars do often undergo post-race checks by the FIA. This is just a standard procedure just to check that they are all legal and that they fully comply with the technical regulations. And they would normally choose a car or cars at random. This, I imagine, was the reason why both of the McLarens were fully checked over after the race. There was no indication from the FIA document that there were any suspicions that they could be in breach of the rules. This was just a bog standard check. As everybody spotted, Lando's pace dropped off quite considerably in the last couple of laps. He went from being 6 seconds behind Verstappen to 20 as he crossed the line, which at the time we didn't understand why. We knew that he had an issue and that he was managing this, but we weren't sure what the specific issue was. It was thought initially that this could potentially be fuel related, but perhaps McLaren saw something on the data that looked a bit dodgy and they just wanted to play safe. But in saying that, they didn't give the same radio message to Oscar as they did to Lando. During those first checks of both the front and the rear of the skids, Norris and Piastri's car was measured to be below the 9mm limit that is specified in the regulations, and we are talking the tiniest of margins. So to make sure that these measurements were as close to accurate as possible, they were checked over for a second time, and this then confirmed that they had fallen foul of the rules, and the decision was to disqualify them both. Disqualification is the usual penalty for teams if a car is found by the stewards and the technical delegates to not comply with the regulations. And this can relate to a number of reasons, but it is usually plank wear or if a car is underweight. And it's not the first time that we have seen this happen this season, because if you recall, Ferrari had both of its cars disqualified from the second race of the season in China. Leclerc was disqualified for being underweight and Hamilton was disqualified for having too much plank wear. Pierre Gasly was also disqualified from that same race for exactly the same reason as Leclerc. Nico Hülkenberg, he was also disqualified earlier this season in Bahrain for excessive wear of his skid block. So these things do happen. They're quite rare these days, but they're not uncommon. Rewind back to last year and George Russell lost his victory at Spa, again for plank wear. And Hülkenberg again had another disqualification, this time in Brazil. But this was not for technical reasons, this was because he'd had assistance from the marshals to help push his car in a dangerous position, which is not allowed. That last example shows that it's not always a technical reason why a driver is disqualified from a race. Of course, there's been many times in the past when a driver has been thrown out of a race because of maybe a collision, or they've even ignored a call to serve a penalty. In this case, McLaren has not done this to try and gain any sort of competitive advantage over its rivals. This was clearly a miscalculation on their part. As always, they have set up the car believing that this was the best setup to go with that would deliver the maximum performance. It's just on this occasion that they've got it wrong, and it's come at a cost. The thing is though, I cannot understand for the life of me why McLaren would decide it needed to take such a risk when it had a healthy lead over Verstappen in the championship. I mean, even though they went in this direction, they were only ever on par with Max's pace during the race. They were never quick enough to win. What's amusing to me is that McLaren, when it tried to argue its case as to why it had broken the rules, it argued that the limited track time because of the rain and the red flags during practice was the reason why it didn't foresee any problems with porpoising during the race. They had 3 practice sessions. Even if they were interrupted, that is more than enough time to decide which direction you want to go in on setup. This argument of theirs is quite ironic because in Austin, McLaren admitted that they were actually too conservative with the setups that they had chosen for that weekend, which of course was a sprint weekend, so they only had 1 hour of practice. So for me, this is just a poor excuse for a clear misjudgment and for going too aggressive. It was quite a surprise just how long it took for the FIA to disqualify both of the McLarens, because usually in the past when we've had incidents when a car or cars have been summoned to the stewards for plank wear or for being underweight, it's usually a slam dunk disqualification. But this verdict took quite a while to be made, so my theory is that the stewards really wanted to be thorough in their investigation of this because they were aware of the consequences this would have on the championship. McLaren released a statement after the FIA's verdict was issued, and in that they accepted that they had made a mistake and they apologised to both Lando and to Oscar for costing them valuable points in their championship battle. And speaking of the championship, after Norris and Piastri's disqualification, how does this set up the title battle going into the final two races with also one sprint to go? Norris does remain the championship leader, and the gap that he had to Piastri remains the same as it was before Vegas at 24 points. The big gainer is Verstappen, of course. He has gone from being 42 points back after the initial result, but with the disqualifications, he is now level with Piastri on 366 points. Max has been saying a lot of late that he really did need a slice of luck if he was going to win the title, and he's got it. He has blown it wide open. Once again, it's anybody's game going into these last two rounds. For Lando, even though this is a blow, it's not a complete disaster. It would have been nice for him, I'm sure, to have a bit more of a healthier cushion, but he still is nearly a whole victory ahead of his two main competitors. You just think what was going through his head of losing not only these points through the disqualification, but also that engine failure that he had at Zandvoort, because altogether that's 36 points that he's lost. But in saying that, Piastri and Verstappen have also been in that position where they'll look back on certain races this season where they'll think, I lost points there and that may have cost me the championship. So all of them have had bad races, bad luck during the year where they could have picked up more points. But as for the ramifications of this disqualification, you do wonder what this means for McLaren going forward. Will they have to take the same approach as Ferrari of being ultra cautious when setting up the car just to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Or is this just going to be a one-off? They'll only have one practice session in Qatar to get it right, so the pressure really is back on. McLaren will kick themselves if this ends up being the race that cost them the World Championship, because it could have been so easily avoided. But nevertheless, we have got an awesome end to the season on our hands. It could go anybody's way. I can't wait to see how it goes. Well guys, there you have it. That is it for today's video. Be sure to like the video, and if you are new around here, do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.